The following video podcast is a presentation of News Talk 760, WJR. This is PNC Roundtable.
Hello, this is Rick DeVore, Regional President for PNC Bank, and thank you for listening to PNC Roundtable. It's on this show that we tackle some of the region's tough issues with people who make a difference.
Now here's the PNC Roundtable.
Welcome into our PNC Roundtable. Hi, I'm Paul W. Smith, along with PNC's Rick DeVore. We're offering our guests direct access to business, community, civic leaders whose daily work helps to shape the economic outlook and quality of life for all of us in southeastern Michigan. This is a dynamic forum that features hot issues with real answers from key opinion leaders. Each month, in fact, new guests discuss economic and social issues that directly affect our communities. And Rick, that is certainly the case with this program today.
I would agree, and I can't think of a better guest to have on the program and more timely topic than having Warren Evans as our guest today.
A conversation with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. Nice to see you, Mr. Executive, and nice to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
We know how busy you are. We know how tough your job is. How's it going?
Going well. And, you say well, obviously in a contained bubble because, it could burst, I guess, down the line. But we're doing well. We started with a $52 million structural deficit. I can say that we worked very hard to get about 20 of that off the plate, probably a little bit more. We've done a number of things, as you know. And so we're almost halfway home, but now the heavy lifting really comes.
From the very beginning, Executive Evans, you said your focus would be on getting the county's finances in order. And we've had several conversations on our morning show, but I'm going to ask you some of the same questions again for our PNC Roundtable audience online here. And that is, did you know just how bad the financial mess was?
I had a pretty good idea, probably a little bit worse, but I won't claim to have been buffaloed. I think we had a pretty good idea that it was far worse than we were hearing, and that clearly has been true.
And you got $20 million off that $52 million on your back. You got $20 million already.
We have, and it's been difficult. But I think if you have the theory, number one, it's got to be a shared sacrifice, and number two, you got to be completely transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it. It takes a little of the weight off. Doesn't make it particularly easier, but it makes it more palatable, I think, to more people.
I have to tell you, Mr. Executive, we hear that word a lot, transparent, from a lot of politicians. But I have to say, it really seems that word really means something to you and has been a backdrop or focal point of your administration. You really have been transparent from the beginning.
I think so, and I think to some extent that's part of people's appreciation is at least the guy's telling us the truth. You can't change the situation overnight, but you also have to be pretty realistic about it. The funny thing to me is I've had criticism of being too transparent, which kind of makes me laugh. It's like being a little bit pregnant, I guess. I don't really know how to be kind of transparent. Either you are or you aren't.
Kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And what about for you, Rick, running a bank? You want to be transparent in what you do, but what's that mean to you?
No, I would agree with you. And, transparent, I don't think you can really do too much. And with that said, when I think of Warren, I have this lucite in my office, and it's a very plain vanilla lucite, and it says, will we have the courage? And I think, in addition to transparency, I think it takes some courage to be that forthright. And I've been one of the many that have been extremely impressed with how forthright and how courageous really Warren has been so far.
You're not alone. I join you in that. And when you consider the restructuring of the government that you've had to do, the 5% pay reduction for employees, settling the lawsuit with the retirees on health care, there's been real progress. You still have, 11 open union contracts, and negotiations with them are ongoing. How are those going?
Well, they're ongoing, but to be realistic, we're not making the headway we'd like to make, and I certainly understand the union's position, so there's nothing adversarial here. It's just the reality that county employees have given a lot over the years. Unfortunately, their giving didn't result in a balanced budget. But on the other hand, I have a number I've got to get to in order for us not to fall off the edge of a cliff sometime next year. And so, we're working at it, and I think everybody's working diligently, but we're not where we need to be.
We are having a conversation with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans here on our PNC Roundtable, and with that thought in mind, Mr. Executive, you have put together a restructuring plan. You have a very clear, transparent roadmap to get where you feel you have to get, but still, you recently sent a letter to the state treasurer declaring a financial emergency and asking that a preliminary review of the county's finances take place, and you're seeking a consent agreement. Is this about timing? Why that, and why now?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one is do what you can without the additional power or leverage that any outside help will give you. I mean, it's long and deliberate thinking about bringing the state in anyway, but, when we sat there and looked at it, I said very early in January, I see a little light at the end of the tunnel, but we got a long way to go. I see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel now. I know it's not a train coming at me.
Good.
But I also know we can't clear the tracks without some more leverage. And frankly, the easiest way to do that, the least onerous way, the way that leaves the authority within the county, is through the use of a consent agreement. And, just be realistic and perfectly candid. Much of that heavy lifting has to do with the ability to close out those union contracts in a way that we get a contract that we can all live with, but can get us out of debt. And that is the authority that we see coming from a consent agreement. It's interesting. A lot of people have suggested that this is just a precursor to asking for an emergency manager. It absolutely is not. There is no way that I can see we need anything more than a consent agreement to get us where we need to get.
So same thing with bankruptcy then, in terms of some people saying, oh, this is just a flanking move to either declare bankruptcy or, bring in the manager?
Yeah, the clear path is that we get out of this. And the restructuring plan, if folks sit down and look at it, the numbers are the numbers. We get out of this with a consent agreement. If we decide to argue and fuss and the commission balks at what they want to do next and those things, certainly you can postpone it, you can add to the debt, you can make much more confusion than is necessary. What I'm saying is it's not necessary.
Make it clearer for me. Maybe everyone else understands it, but how does it, do you get out of that with a consent agreement? How does that work?
The consent agreement will allow us, if we get to impasse, get to the point where we cannot resolve the collective bargaining issues, will allow the imposition of our terms and conditions. That gets us out of it.
I see.
And just pure and simple, that's it. Now, it doesn't. A consent agreement doesn't allow you to break union contracts. These are contracts that are already expired, and so the power is kind of inherent in a consent agreement. Would give us the leverage we think to get that done.
In line with what Rick was asking and saying, this is not throwing your hands up and saying that's it. We need an emergency manager or we need bankruptcy. But you have said from the beginning you're looking at all avenues, and that bankruptcy is not one that you want to take, but it is one you would take if you felt you had to.
Yeah, we don't. And to be perfectly clear, we don't see that on the table. We've got a clear path out.
Well, that's good news then.
Yes, it is. It is. But again, this is a team effort. There are other branches of government that have to be a part of this, and the state has to be a part. And so if people dawdle, if people keep throwing dust in the air, making us all sneeze, and time goes by, then we may have to go to another option. It's not necessary if we do it the way the restructuring plan would call for. But again, I need cooperation and team play.
And Paul, you and I have had on this show different mayors and county executives from time to time, and when you look at, we keep getting compared to Illinois, but even in Illinois, they have their version of the Headley Amendment on what I call the revenue side, isn't as onerous in terms of how much it can go up as the state of Michigan is. So, when you look, again, I'm not trying to be a simpleton, but we have about, as I think just shy of $7 billion in municipal bonds that we own for our own account. When you look at it on the revenue side, Wayne County, you have some population decline, and of course valuations are down, and then even if valuations go up, you can't go up you have this governor like in NASCAR,
Right.
you know, on the revenue side. And then on the expense side, it's healthcare and it's, you know, it's retiree benefits and so forth. And Warren and I were kidding before the show, not kidding, but talking about the fact that when I did my research, and we did a lot on this topic, 2002, 2008, opening up the defined benefit plans to new enrollees. Oh my God, that was, we should have felt earth tremors go off. And those are the kinds of things that Warren has been given. I mean, that's the plate that he's been passed out. And it's pretty onerous when you look at it. But I try to keep it a little bit simpler in that regard.
Well, what Rick says is, you know, is absolutely true. I mean, in 10 years, the pension fund, which was the gold standard, pretty much 95% funded, went to 44% in that period of time, and based in large part based on those plans that were created. I mean, if you could pick something that was silly to do at that time, you couldn't have found anything in my mind that was sillier.
Right.
But we've inherited it, and we can't sit there and look back and worry about it. We certainly can know going forward that that's something we're not going to get involved in now. So, you know, we trudge forward.
With what all of us have gone through in the not too distant past with Detroit, the city of Detroit, I got to believe it's actually helpful to you when you sit down to talk with people, because you're still negotiating with unions. You're still, even while we're waiting with the financial review and all of that, you carry on the day-to-day business. People have a better understanding of the reality of problems after watching what Detroit went through. And I don't mean to assume, but I'll assume that that's helpful to you getting the point across.
I think in many respects it is. I think there's some other kind of intangibles here that we don't like to talk about too much. Like folks feeling that they're in a position that says they have to ask for things that they know aren't possible because they have an audience.
Because they represent people.
And so this is a right-to-work state. There are people out there who,
Has anyone? I'm putting you on the spot because I don't know many people I could ask this question of, and I'm not asking you to say who.
I know you're asking me because I'm so transparent.
That's correct. You said it, and I agree. Even your granddaughter's got a big smile on her face. And here it is. Has anyone? Because I've never been a boss, and I've never been a negotiator for other people or for a city or a county, in your case. Has anyone ever said to you, understand something, Warren, I've got to ask you for this. I know you can't do it, but I have to ask because my people expect me to ask. Has that ever happened?
Paul W., that's happened for the last 30 years.
Really?
Absolutely. In union negotiations all of the time. I mean, those things happen. I'm not saying they're pervasive, that they're, the overarching part of the discussion, but yes, I mean, that's a part of bargaining.
It means actually you've got an honest communication going with that person, and
sure.
That means that you're going to be closer to getting things to make both sides happy that way, if there's honesty like that.
Well, we started from a premise of saying, and I said it 100 times, and I think it resonated well with people, is we'll certainly have discussions and arguments about how we get out of this mess. But I want everybody to agree on the depth of the whole, what the mess actually is. And I think that message had been conveyed well. And so when you look at a restructuring plan, you see the number we have to get to. You see this is the only plan on the table. We know what's left that's necessary to get there. I mean, it's hard for, a rationally based person not to accept that. Now, what I hear an awful lot is, why aren't you going after revenue? And I will go after revenue when the time is right to go after revenue, but I can't count like people did in the past. I can't count on a millage or something else that's not in hand. You can't budget.
That'd be phantom revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's not a reality now. I mean, if you look at, for example, property taxes in a decline in Wayne County over a number of years, from 2000 until now, we've lost about $650 million over what we would have gotten. And if we had that revenue, and that's new revenue, and I'd like to get it, we wouldn't be in this position. But we don't have that revenue now. when property taxes go down on your $400,000 house, they go down to when your property value goes down to $200,000, you get relief. When it gets back up to $400,000, the county is capped by Headley at a percentages on the way, so that lost amount of money from what you originally paid for your house, when your house is back valued at its original amount or more.
Really?
Yeah, you don't skip any steps falling down, but you do on the way back up.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised
that's a lot of people don't realize that
that's
about
a
the
little
Headley
bit.
Amendment.
That's a little bit of a structural error.
That's revenue that we haven't lost sight of. We think that's revenue that at some point in life ought to be recaptured. But this is not a Detroit or a Wayne County bailout issue. There are 82 counties, 83, I remember, and each one of them is hurt the same way by this formula. It is not just a Wayne County problem. So if there's some way to leverage that in time and try to get that revenue, I'd be the first person in line to try to make that happen. But I can't budget this year in this crisis on a hope for some change later.
Makes sense. And that's, unfortunately, that's how a lot of places got in trouble, cities, counties across the country, counting on that phantom revenue, counting it as if it's a real thing. Heck, our state did. When the reports would come out every year. But that's behind us, and we now have relentless positive action going forward. You still have $1.3 billion in underfunded health care liabilities and $900 million in underfunded pension liabilities. Now, how in the world do you tackle that?
Well, there are two ways. One is you try to put some additional influx of cash in when you can, but also part of our restructuring plan is changing those plans both on the retirement and the health care end, so that we're not creating, in fact, taking away in some instances, some of that long-term liability that's not funded. So one is obviously an influx of new cash, but the other is also changing the plans, changing the long-term exposure by reducing some of that cost. And we've done that. I mean, with the retiree health care case, we knocked a big chunk of unfunded liability out with that settlement agreement. And so we're being effective at both ends. It's just Rome wasn't built in a day.
It certainly wasn't. We're speaking with Wayne County Executive Warren Evans, and as you certainly well know, every day people walk or drive by that big unfinished building, kind of a hulk of an unfinished building that was supposed to be the new Wayne County Jail. This is something you inherited that you just as soon wouldn't have inherited. You would have liked to have not inherited it, and people still are wondering if it'll ever be resolved in the face of the county's financial crisis, and if so, how?
Well, it'll be resolved, and let me answer it a couple ways. Number one, and I guess probably the saddest part of this to me, is if it was built, and if it was built on time and on budget, it still didn't have enough beds to solve the problem. So it started with some very poor planning,
right,
in my estimation, to begin with. But obviously it didn't turn out that way. Now, the simple answer for me is it's probably the most frustrating thing I deal with, because I have to wait to do anything significant with it. I mean, with the structural deficit, with our bond rating, there's no way you finish it without borrowing more money. And you can't borrow more money until you're credit worthy enough to borrow more money. And so, it's...
We used to call that a catch-22.
Well, what I want to do is, do what is in the best interest of Wayne County's taxpayers, which means spend the least amount of money to adequately solve the problem. But with our financial condition right now, I think it'd be, the cart pulling the horse. And I think I got to get the horse in gear first and kind of get it turned around.
And it's premature to even talk about that not being a good location for a jail.
Yeah, that argument, I don't really have a dog in that fight. I mean, I get both sides of the argument. Most of the country, if you go around the jails and stuff, are downtown. That's a secondary argument for me. The first argument is, how do I get it built, leaving as much money in the pockets of taxpayers as we can, and solve a problem. I mean, if we build a nice, beautiful jail, and we're still releasing people because there's not enough bed capacity, we have not solved a problem. And that's what I would have seen if we had gotten the other jail built, even on budget, and that's sad.
You were probably uniquely qualified to weigh in on that issue, I would think.
Running up jails.
Running a jail.
But getting off the topic of the jail, maybe, but just we've mentioned in the past we were involved a number of years ago in the Cobo Hall expansion with 2 other banks. Do you see any more, not financially putting money into the mix, but can you talk a little bit about cooperation with Oakland and Macomb and other things that maybe you would like to do? I'll stay away from water for a minute. But
Good. I appreciate that reprieve. No, I think, first of all, that what they generally call the Big Four, which is the 3 county executives and the mayor of the city of Detroit. I don't know that I've ever in my public career had a group of people with a better working relationship and a history, which I think is real important. I have known times, and you too have, where they're competing entities for jobs or a factory or whatever it is, and actually the 2 competing interests are so wound up with winning it themselves, they let it go out of state.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see much of that here. I mean, there is a regional approach that we all have that I think says, if you locate in Macomb County and I don't get it in Wayne, I'm still getting a residual benefit. I want to see it in a region. I want the region to grow. We've done some things lately with Virgin Airlines at the airport, Spirit Airlines at the airport. We've sold a couple hundred acres of land to be developed by the Pauls Group at the airport. So economic development and some other things are starting to work in Wayne County. I just don't spend a lot of time talking about them. I spend a lot of time trying to get them done. I think the lip service probably doesn't bring in much revenue, but certainly bringing in the businesses does.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because there has been recent movement out there at the airport, that Spirit Airline building that they want to build on that land out there. And I even understand that there's something going on at that old defunct Pinnacle racetrack site. I don't know what's going on there, but there's something going on out there. Obviously, you'd like to have more of that kind of development, or any kind of development now in the area there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've spent, besides the budget, 6 months trying to think of, what the best plan was going forward for economic development stuff. And I'm pretty much convinced that it's logistics and transportation that are what are really going to bring jobs to the region. I mean, you can find sexier things to do. But the warehousing, the office space, the logistics work. I mean, we're ideally situated here with a port authority, the river. We have a world-class airport. We have highways that will take you everywhere. We need to, I think, better utilize some of those resources and be more of a logistics and transportation hub. And I think that's what the Pauls Group is going to be doing at the airport. And I think that, both the mayor and I, the mayor of the city of Detroit, and I both said the measure of our first 4 years has an awful lot to do with increasing property values and increasing the population.
Right.
Keeping people here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then starting to get people to come in.
And I firmly believe that I think the residents that have only lived in Southeast Michigan sometimes don't appreciate the quality of our airport. I mean, it's amazing.
For those of us who travel a lot,
yeah,
well, first of all, it's an award-winning airport. It's not just us saying it.
Right.
The people who study and give these awards are giving awards to our airport. It's really a world-class airport.
No, it is, and not to mention, but the number of flights. We're headquartered in Pittsburgh. There's 600 flights a day leaving Detroit. There's 49.
Leaving Pittsburgh?
That's it.
49, and we have 600?
Used to be a hub, U.S. Airways. It's no longer a hub. It's been dehubbed. I went to Philadelphia, and you can't get anywhere.
That's astonishing.
That's amazing.
But
think about that statistic. And
even, I think, as important is find another urban center in this country that has the land that's undeveloped around its airport, like here.
Right,
I mean,
that's the thing.
You just don't find it.
Forgive me for already forgetting, but your predecessor had a dream for, what was it called?
Aerotropolis. Aerotropolis.
I was sitting here trying to write that. I couldn't remember
I can't
what
spell
it was. It's Aerotropolis or whatever, and I haven't heard that word in a long time. But the idea was in the right place in terms of taking advantage of all that land around there and all that potential opportunity, I guess. It's something that again, is in our future, but you have to get rid of a lot of problems, as you've said, Mr. Executive, that you'd like to talk about the revenue-enhancing things, but you got some other issues. You can only put so many fingers in the leaks and to stop those leaks and then to start to replenish. Most recently, I had the pleasure of being involved with this thing that Josh Linkner put together, Fuel Detroit, and one of the compelling speakers, as he always is, Irvin Johnson, and we love the people who've already put a lot of money into Detroit and the surrounding the city and the county and the state, and we thank them for that. We thank God for that, but we do need new people coming in, and when you look at a guy like Magic Johnson, who is just involved in so many different businesses, finally looking at this area. And I think very specifically he was talking about around the old state fairgrounds. Right. This is a very important and healthy move in the right direction. New money coming in to develop in our area.
Absolutely.
And I don't even, what is it they were thinking or talking about doing at the state fairgrounds?
It's just south of the Meyer Center. There is
do you know what the specifics are?
I don't. Right? I thought it was mixed use.
Yeah, there's mixed use. Yeah.
Kind of a combination of things. But that center has proved to be a big winner, and there's a great bank I know in the parking lot there that with a brand new branch. I'm
what
well
bank
aware.
would that be? Anyone else want to ask the question? I'm used to throwing the softballs out there, and you knock them right out of the park. Well, good for you. Now, how many branches would that be now?
Well, actually, it's probably about 111. We've been consolidating and doing some other things, too.
111?
Retail banking has changed a lot, and it continues to change.
Well, it does.
That's the new design, though, that one there. But,
the one that we can see out there?
Yep.
111. I am a bit shocked that there are that many.
Well, it's probably 7,600 in the country. So PNC branches. So there's quite a few.
Yeah, I think, Warren, to tell you the truth, just between you and me, don't say anything in front of him, I think his bank is really, really bigger than we know. I mean, I think PNC is a lot bigger than we generally think of. You know what I'm
just
saying?
thinking of how much money would be involved in 111 branches.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too.
I don't do the math real well, but I think it's a big number.
I think it's a big number, yeah. I think he should be buying lunch.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm just guessing.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a lot of good positive things happening, and there are some real hurdles to overcome. But I've never felt more confident than when you stepped in and started stepping up, Warren. And I'm only calling you Warren now because I've known you for a very long time, and I have nothing but the utmost of respect for you, personally and professionally. And talk about the right guy at the right time in the right job. And if there's anything that we can do, and I know that Rick feels the same way, and he can do a lot more from his professional standpoint, but we certainly can get the word out over this big megaphone of WJR. But as a Wayne County executive, you're really doing a tremendous job under some of the toughest conditions anybody's ever faced.
Well, thanks, Paul W. Appreciate it.
And Rick, I know you feel the same way.
No, absolutely. And we've done our share, not only at the airport, but we've been an active purchaser of some of the bonds, the delinquent tax notes. I was telling Warren, 2012, 40 million, 60 million in 2013, and 20 million last year. So we're an active player with Wayne County. This is
well. Then you have a lot riding on the success of Wayne County.
Oh, we do, and it's interesting. When you do your research and you read, and I tend to read these things. I read in detail Moody's and S&P's write-ups, and they look at counties like they look at companies, and you look at the revenue and expenses, of course, and you look at the projections, but they also look at management. And if you think of what Warren has brought to the table, we're probably, it's a little premature right now, but I think Wayne County will get an upgrade because of the quality of the management led by Warren. And that will result in lower interest costs to the taxpayers in Wayne County. So it's no different than running a company. In the past, there was a negative knock on quote-unquote management. I'm not making that up. I'm quoting right from the Moody's and S&P write-ups.
Of course.
And so for me, when people look in the future and say, well, gee, is this really going to work if the administration stays on this path and is able to overcome what I would agree is some large challenges.
Substantial obstacles.
I think there'll be an upgrade just in terms of the quality of the management team. And so I think he should be commended for that. And that to me is the biggest thing, the biggest aha when I read through a mountain of paper. Everybody and their brother has written about Wayne County. And we follow it as well because we're, like I said earlier, very active players in the municipal bond market. And, so I really think that it bodes well for the future, but we got a long ways to go.
Are you feeling that, Mr. Executive?
I am, and I think one of the things that, good corporate partners, like PNC and others, are critical to making this work. There's absolutely no question about it. It is one of those things where I don't want Wayne County to miss the upswing in the economy. Everything in life is cyclical. We do not need to be the drain on an upswing in the economy. We need to get our business in order and be able to rise with the rest of the sea. This boat needs to rise also. And it's timing. It's not waiting till the last minute. There's a tendency in politics to keep kicking the can down the road until somehow it's more palatable, either politically or some other way. We can't afford to do that. We've got to do what we have to do. We have to do it now. And I think 2 years from now, we'll all be smiling and saying, that was really rough, but I think we're on our way back. Thank God it got done.
From your lips to God's ears, we're hoping, and we're right alongside with you. Wayne County Executive Warren Evans, our very special guest on our PNC Roundtable. For PNC's Rick DeVore, I'm Paul W. Smith. I'll be talking to you in the mornings, Monday through Friday from 5:30 till 9 on WJR.